Hello and welcome to this 18th edition of the International Conference on the Quality of Education. This year's theme is dedicated to highlighting key determinants for improving learning outcomes based on data analysis from TIMSS, PIRLS, and PISA. I am delighted to moderate this sixth session in the presence of our guests, Dr. Ambalika DOGRA from India, Dr. Sigamoney NAICKER from South Africa, Dr. AbouElfadl AbDOU from Egypt, and Dr. Jocelyn Alayan from Turkey. Our first presenter will be Dr. Ambalika DOGRA from India. She is professor at Rishihood University. Welcome, Dr. DOGRA, and many thanks for accepting our invitation. Your presentation's title is An Analysis of India's Performance in PISA. Why did India perform poorly and what is to be done now?
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me a stage to speak on such an important topic, the main determinants of improving learning outcomes and analysis of PISA, TIMSS, PIRLS data. I have decided to take this topic where I thought to analyze India's performance in PISA. Actually, India participated only once in PISA in 2009, and the performance was very bad. So I thought to analyze this case study and to give some suggestions on what can be done now in the future. So, if I talk generally about PISA, PISA is an organization. It is a part of OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It is a program for international student assessment where students they are assessed, mainly the 15-year-old students. They are assessed on their performance on different disciplines, for example, mathematics, science, and reading. And 90 countries so far they participated in the assessment, which began in first in 2000. And students they are evaluated every 3 years on these key subjects. 64 countries or economies they originally participated in PISA in 2009, and 34 OECD countries. In addition to 34 OECD countries, 31 partner countries and economies they participated, and India was one of the partner country. These 65 participants administered the PISA 2009 test in 2009. 10 additional partner participants, which were PISA 2009 plus countries. So India was one of the PISA 2009 plus country. The test was administered in 2010 because they couldn't uh, follow the timeline of the PISA. So the test was same, but the administration of the test was done in 2010. So and though they participated in 2010, but the technical and the quality standards they were same. And rest of the other countries also they participated in PISA 2009 plus. These were Costa Rica, Georgia, and Mauritius, Venezuela, and two states from India actually they participated. The one of the state is Himachal Pradesh, which is a hilly area, and another one is Tamil Nadu. So Himachal Pradesh is a north part of the India, and Tamil Nadu is in the south. So they both of these states they are very different. And among 29 states, only two states they participated in PISA in 2009. So India's performance in PISA 2009. India was the participant country, and the students of the country they fared poorly, and the rank was 72nd among 74 participating countries. And then Congress government they boycotted PISA, and they blamed that the questions they were out of context. So they were out of syllabus. Some teachers also they complained that the questions they were out of syllabus. According to Walker 2011, HP, which is one of the state of India, the mean reading literacy score was 317. This was the lowest mean reading score which was observed, along with that of Kyrgyzstan. And 11% of the students they were estimated to have a proficiency in reading literacy, which was at or above the baseline level. So only 11% of the students they met the baseline level of reading proficiency. And 89% of the students in this state, HP, they were below the baseline level. And in mathematical literacy, the same state, it attained mean score of 338, and which was almost same as compared to Tamil Nadu, which was another state, and another country, Kyrgyzstan. And 12% of the students, they were proficient in mathematics, and gender difference, it favored boys in mathematics literacy. And on scientific literacy, the students, they estimated to have a mean score of 325 on scientific literacy, which was below the means of all OECD countries. This was lowest mean science score observed in PISA 2000 and PISA 2009 plus, along with that of Kyrgyzstan. And 11% of the students, they were proficient in science at least to the baseline level. So only 11% students, they could be proficient in science. And there was a statistically significant gender difference of 20 score points in scientific literacy, which favored boys. In Tamil Nadu, which was another state of India, students, they attained mean score of 337.
Dr. Abdul Nasser, please.
Yes, Dr. Abdul.
There is no voice.
We lost the connection with
Dr. Ambalika.
Dr. Sigamoney, you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. I think
Hello,
we can't.
How are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
How are you?
We can't hear Ambalika.
Yes, yes. Can you present now?
Can I present? Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Okay. Must I go ahead? Must I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
You have a presentation to share?
I'm not going to share my presentation, but I'm going to present. Is that fine?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My main contention in this presentation is that the TIMSS and PISA are not the recipe for solving pedagogical challenges in developing countries. And there are several reasons why I don't think PISA can assist in developing countries, and I'll refer to that shortly. But I want to bring to your attention the advice of Joseph Stiglitz, the former advisor to Bill Clinton, in his book Making Globalization Work, where he advises developing countries that their future depends on what they do as a country. It's clear that developing countries cannot rely on handouts from the developed world. And in order to flourish in the global economy, every country requires the requisite skills. And this is something that policy planners need to take very seriously when addressing the challenges in the education system. I know that Morocco has made a significant investments in education, and And I think government in Morocco has done a lot in the last few years. But what we all know is that developing countries have unique characteristics, but the most common is the poor quality of education, poor results, but there is substantial access to the system. So many commentators have said that PISA is not a test that has validity. And this is a huge risk to the investment of money into the system of developing countries, given the scarce resources. And the scores from the SATs and PISA are part of a metrification associated with the modern world. No doubt aided by a global marketplace in which business leaders and technologists, instead of humanists and educators, have garnered political power. What you need is humanists and educators, since they are doing the work in education. So PISA is simply just another standardized achievement test. So we have knowledge with which to criticize it, because over decades we have learned what constitutes high quality standardized achievement tests. Well designed standardized achievement tests have items that have been written carefully, been scrutinized well, tried out, demonstrate little gender or cultural bias, and contribute to test reliability. The total test must also provide convincing arguments about its validity for particular purposes. And not all sets meet such standards in an exemplary manner, and PISA is no exception. PISA is being used cross-nationally, thus every item in this set must have the same meaning in each country to ensure that each country has items that are not positively or negatively associated with the all-important passing rates for items. If this condition cannot be met, interpretation of this set may be seriously compromised. Many scholars are not sure that the basic criteria for this particular set can be met, although PISA designers say they can do just that. Common sense and supporting research challenge PISA's claims. For example, there are just a few countries that take the same items: Argentina, Australia, Austria, Azerbaijan, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Denmark, and so on. It is quite likely that it is quite difficult to have test items mean precisely the same thing in each of these nations, and thus be an item of equivalent difficulty in languages of each of these nations. So there's also research coming out of Australia, which is very important for Morocco and other developing countries, that students' attitude towards learning, with more positive attitude towards learning associated with higher achievement levels. TIM shows that disadvantaged students on average like mathematics and science less, are less confident, value mathematics and science less, and have a lower achievement than their advantaged peers. This comes out of an Australian study. What also comes out of the Australian study is that if you investigate the background and demographic data, new reports find that students have higher achievement when they are from a higher socioeconomic background. There's a strong school emphasis on academic success. They have a strong sense of school belonging, and they are not bullied. Now, this is very important data that comes out of the Australian study that calls into question these tests. Another dimension is that, you have to ask the question, is TIMS and PISA and all these tests, are they an economic model or a pedagogic issue? And we must note, Michael Barber wrote a report from a multi-billion-dollar management corporation, McKinsey and Company, which titles "How the World's Best Performing Education Systems Come Out on Top," was mostly universally praised by policymakers to the Western world. The authors concluded from PISA three things mainly: getting the right people to become teachers, developing them into effective instructors, and ensuring that the system is able to deliver the best possible instruction for every child. Now, is this about importing new skills to the underdeveloped environments and improve teachers, etc.? And if this was so, it was so easy, we would have very few problems, given the independence and the time spent by people who export ideas and products in the name of education. So I'm asking questions about whether is this an economic model or is it a pedagogic issue? So what should be the trajectory for developing countries? I think developing countries need to examine the specificities of their own context and develop a curriculum and a school policy based on those challenges. They need to own the vulnerability and understand the implications of vulnerability for teaching and learning. An education department and school need to own the challenges and ameliorate it with authentic plans. So I'm suggesting that the developing world needs to have a social justice theory that informs teaching and learning. An education department needs to plan on the basis of a social justice theory. And just to explain what a social justice theory is, that each person has the equal right to a fully adequate scheme of equal basic liberties, which is compatible with a similar scheme of liberties for all. Social and economic inequalities are to satisfy two conditions. First, they must be attached to the offices and the positions open to all under the conditions of fair equality of opportunity. And second, they must be the greatest benefit to the least advantaged members of society. So, we have all these SDGs and we have inclusive education and we have all these policy papers, but the government departments don't have the operational capability to implement it because there's very little human agency in education departments in developing countries across the world. So what is the problem? The problem is there isn't a narrative that explains what this policy is intended to do and how it's going to be achieved. And one of the problems is that education transformation is too complex for bureaucracies. In societies where there are less challenges, bureaucracies are efficient because they can focus on procedural correctness, and procedural correctness is secondary in societies that are unequal. The great level of inequalities, the more irrelevant and unsuccessful are bureaucracies. So billions of rands and dollars and rupees have been spent on developing policy, but this policy is unimplementable in vulnerable contexts. So bureaucratic institutions are designed to ensure procedural correctness despite the outcome. So I'm suggesting that education departments actually reproduce the status quo in most developing countries. And that what needs to happen is that we need to develop policy on the basis of a social justice theory. And school leaders need to gain critical understandings of their positionality and privilege and be prepared with difficult conversations with each other. And I think in every bit of planning, you have to ask the question, how do we reduce inequalities? So these policies that we develop, we shouldn't focus on TIMS and PISA and so on. We should try to understand the specificities of the context in developing countries, and we need to develop a model of education that's relevant to a developing country. So what am I arguing for? I am saying that the bureaucracies that we have are reproducing the status quo. They're irrelevant. We need to develop planning. We need to develop planning tools based on social justice that ask the question, how can we reduce inequalities in every decision we take? There has to be a shift in terms of thinking about how do we understand our environment and understand all the barriers in those environments. So, for example, in a country like Morocco, if a child doesn't learn to read by the age of 8, that child is going to most likely drop out of school. And that applies to every developing country. So what do? We develop a planning tool that impacts on human resources, that impacts on how you spend the money, the budget. You develop a planning tool that informs every single decision that you make in developing countries, particularly around how the relationship between poverty and teaching and learning. So what do we need? We need to change the narrative and operational capability of education departments who are responsible for schools. Social justice needs to frame the work of the education department. And I think what we need to do is remove the conceptual looseness and the confusion on social justice as a tool for planning education, so that it embraces the marginalized and the vulnerable. And in developing countries, the difference between developing countries and developed countries is that the majority of your children are vulnerable. And so those children need to be brought to the center of the education planning process. A lot of people working within the systems of education struggle to understand the issues of race, class, and disability. And to be effective school leaders in an unequal environment, school leaders should be social justice leaders. School leaders need to gain critical understandings of their positionality and their privilege, and be prepared to engage with a difficult conversation with each other. So what do we need? We need new educational leadership in the developing countries. And social and economic inequalities are to satisfy two conditions. First, they must be attached to the offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. And second, they must be to the greatest benefit of the least disadvantaged members of the society. We cannot plan on the basis of first world models. So the problems with TIMSS and PISA is that it has not worked for disadvantaged learners. And that's been proven in the Australian research and other research in the world. And what happens is that slogans seem to dominate the education environment, with little or no substantial interventions on the lives of the majority of children in developing countries. So the USA, with the Black Lives Matter, revealed that challenges about the reproduction of the status quo and the school to prison pipeline. And as Tony Blair's speechwriter commented, the other thing is relevant to the situation is that modern politics is all about momentum. Stagnate, drift, wobble, and the media, or if strong enough, the opposition will pounce. So education is now seen as a crucial factor in ensuring economic productivity and competitiveness in a context of informational capitalism. So what do I think a country like Morocco should do, or any other developing country in the world? They need to examine what are the barriers that prevent learning from taking place. These are often lack of access to the curriculum, inadequate policy, poverty, lack of parental involvement, language, inaccessible environment, lack of access to basic services. And these are all the systemic challenges that prevent learners from learning. So if we want to follow Joseph Stiglitz's advice about making a real impact in education for children who are vulnerable, who are the majority in the developing world, we need to rethink how we plan education and how we implement education, and what informs our decision-making process. Personally, I don't think the West can offer us solutions unless people in developing countries and people in schools begin to start asking the right questions and base their thinking and practice on a social justice model. Can I stop there, Chairperson? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Ambalika is coming soon, is coming again.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. NAICKER, for your presentation, excellent presentation. And now I think we are with you, Dr. Ambalika DOGRA. Then,
Yes, sir. Actually, I was disconnected and I was not aware that I'm disconnected. So I kept on speaking and I completed my presentation.
Welcome back.
So,
you can continue if you want. Dr. Ambalika, you can continue your
I'm continuing. Actually, I was there in the causes of the poor performance of India in 2009. So I feel the assessment was not suited to the Indian reality, such as specifically for those from rural areas, because mostly schools which participated in PISA assessment, they were government schools and they were from rural areas. And but there are some exceptions also. For example, ASSET is one of the tests which is conducted in India, and here there in ASSET, many unfamiliar questions they were asked, and students they performed to that ASSET very well also. So the next reason is the poor understanding of the basic concepts, because here the focus is more on the rote memorization. That's what people feel, and that the students they believe more in cramming the concepts than the deeper learning. Deeper learning means what they are applying, what they have learned. So if I talk about the Bloom's taxonomy, different aspects of Bloom's taxonomy, we stay till understanding dimension also of the Bloom's taxonomy. We don't go beyond that. We don't go to the application level. We don't go to the synthesis level. So we stay there in the understanding level only. So the next cause of the poor performance is the fixed mindset, because here the mindset of the teachers it was fixed. They feel that the questions which was asked in PISA they were out of syllabus. So the question which I showed you in the presentation also, that was a very simple question, and that was checking the general awareness of the students. So the problem is about the mindset also, and the problem is with the assessment system also. So the system should be changed, and it should ask questions which should also check students' general awareness about the surroundings. Next is mentality is to emphasize more on learning outcomes in the process of the learning. Here we focus more on the outcomes, because I am from this country and I know that the focus is more on the outcomes. I have to achieve that much marks. I have to reach to the 80% or 90% level. I don't focus on the process of the learning. But the essence of the process of learning is more good than the outcomes. So when we'll start focusing more on the process of the learning, the process of the learning is the determinant of the this main theme. So the focus should be more on the process of learning than the outcomes. The next cause was that the unfamiliar questions they were asked. Actually, the questions they were not difficult, but the questions they were unfamiliar. So next is what is to be done now. For example, teacher training. I feel that teachers they should be trained in learning leadership, how to transform students from mere listeners to a learning leaders. That is to be done, and the teachers they need to be trained in this area. And the focus should be more on the process of learning than the learning outcomes. Next is the training of the mindset. Yes, it is important that they need to change the mindset from fixed to a growing one. And next is self direction, because generally the learning is online these days, and when students they learn online, they need to be directed by themselves. So they need to learn that ability where they are directed by themselves, they are monitoring themselves, and they know what kind of strategies they need to use while learning. They need to improve their metacognition also, where they know what they have, what approach they need to use for understanding something or for learning something and for creating something new. So the next is PISA test valid or good enough for the country? According to Hoffman, there is a problem with the sampling also, because the pre-selection of the schools is done in the PISA assessment, which doesn't represent the population. Next is what a pupil in certain class is expected to know and what to do is not clear. Comparability, comparison of the learning at a given age. Curriculum and the progress of the students may differ from country to country because they have a different culture, they have a different language, and all of these issues they come. Next is many academics and educators critique PISA as an economic measurement, not an educational one, because PISA is a part of OECD, which focus more on the economic development. So it is more like an economic measurement than the educational measurement. And media use PISA to blame the system of school of the countries. Politicians also use PISA to assess. Politicians use PISA assessment as a political process. And there is a correlation between the poverty and the low results. The more poor country, lower will be the results. So that's what happened in PISA. And testing culture, which leads to anxiety and stress also, because we are in an era where we are just thinking and debating if students they need to get assessed or not. So if self-assessment is another aspect or another term which we can use to assess students, but here we are focusing more on how to assess students. And diverse social and cultural history. So questions, they are framed by the Western understanding. And PISA needs to rethink its strategy and framework. Other organizations may jump in for collecting the students' data. For example, UNESCO may come in to see and to collect the students' data and to find out the different analysis of the data, to find out what is going on in the data and what students they are performing, what is the performance of the students. So I think instead of just assessing students, the focus should be more on the learning process. And that's what I have to say about this presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. DOGRA, for your excellent presentation. I will come back to you at the end of the session to answer questions. Our third presenter will be Dr. AbouElfadl AbDOU from Egypt. He is professor at Cairo University. Welcome, Dr. AbDOU, and many thanks for accepting our invitation. Your presentation title is Teaching Practices to Improve the Quality of Learning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nasser, and thank you for collecting me with this great professor, Dr. Ambalika, Dr. Sigamoney, Dr. Jocelyn. Can I share my presentation?
Yes.
It takes a few seconds for uploading. Thank you so much, my colleagues. My presentation is Teaching Practice to Improve the Quality of Learning, TV Teacher as a Mentor for Learner. My name is Dr. AbouElfadl AbDOU, Senior International Expert TVET Quality Assurance and Accreditation, International Certified Professional Trainer, Cairo University. I start my presentation with these questions. Why teaching professional is one of the most honorable professions? To answer these questions, you need to know teaching professional is one of the most honorable professions because teachers is building values. Teacher is building values and guiding principles and core beliefs that help a group of people work together as a team and work toward common goals. Also, professor or teachers directs behavior. Teachers directing the learner behavior towards the desired behaviors and working to address the undesirable behavior through treatment program and fix their behavior. Also, professors gain knowledge. Teachers acquire knowledge from a variety of sources, to develop and constantly updated learner knowledge, so they building their knowledge. Experience and skills about the teachers transfer their experience and skills to learner in the classroom, liberates, thus developing the learner experience and skills. Teaching is the primary profession that produce the rest of the other professions. Teachers are the basis for the production of the other professions such as medicine, engineering, pharmacy. The basic element for any professions is teachers. All educational system agree that the teacher is the one of the basic element of the educational learning process. The principal elements that make teaching and learning possible and attainable are the teachers, the learner, and the conducive learning environment. The teacher serves as the prime mover of the educational while the learner are the key participant in the learning process. The conducive learning environment provides essential features and integrated that could make headway in the guide of the process and the methodologies needed for smoothing linking among the three elements, teachers and learner and environment. Without an academically qualified teacher and a professional trainer, no educational system can reach its desired goals, even with changing its traditional rules from a source of the knowledge to a mentor for a learner. Without academic, professional teacher or trainer, you can't develop the learner knowledge and skills and attitude. The relationship of teacher competency and to quality assurance. Teacher competency are closely linked to ensure the quality of education. It can be described as a direct proportional. The more teachers competency, the more influential the education will be more better. So it's direct communication, it's a direct relationship. When the teacher competency is high, the outcomes will be highest also. Teacher-based practice is the key to success. How is it? How does it work? When you teacher using a best practice around the world and developing their skills, the way in the road of the success by developing knowledge and the skills and the attitude of their learner. Teaching practice to improve the quality of learner. There is many best practice to improve the quality of learner, starting with planning. Planning is the process thinking regarding the activity required to achieve a desired goal. Design, create, fashion, execute, or construct according to the plan. About design, a design is a plan for the construction for an object or system for the implementation of an activity or process, or the result of that plan be specific. And in the same road, also teacher should use the verb to design express the process of developing of design. Development, the act of process growing or using smoothing to grow to become larger or more advanced. Teachers should develop their courses based on planning and design. The second is evaluations. Evaluation is a process that is the process for examining a program. It involves collecting and analyzing information about programs, activity, and outcomes. It purpose to make judgment about the program to improve the effectiveness. The second is understanding other. About understanding other, it does not mean that the teachers have to agree with their feeling or point of view. Instead, it means that the teacher recognize other point of view and accept that is different from them. Teacher may still have to do difficult things that others don't agree with them, but hopefully both teachers and they understand that. The second point is self-esteem. Self-esteem is teacher overall opinion of himself, how he feel about his abilities and limitations. When teacher have healthy self-esteem, he feel good about himself and see himself as a deserving the respect of others. When teachers have low self-esteem, he put little value in his opinions and idea. The second point, or the second best practice is listening. Listening is the key of all effective communication. Without the ability of listening effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. As a result, communication breaks down, and the sender of the message can easily become frustrated or irritated. Good listening skills can lead to better learners' satisfactions, greater productivity with fewer mistakes, and increased sharing of the information that is run can lead to more creative and innovative work. The other best practice is presentations. Presentation skills are the skills teachers need to in delivering effective and engaging presentation to a variety of learners. These skills cover a variety of areas such as the structure of teacher presentation, the design of teacher's slides, the tone of teacher's voice, and the body language they convey. The other best practice is support successful response. Teachers should support correct response and encourage other learners to actively participate with their colleges. The other best practice is interact with the learner. Interaction is needed in the classroom activity. It helps to the teaching and learning process run smoothly, and it can increase learning communicative. It tells how the student have interactions among them and teacher even with all classroom. Also, teachers should use student interactions factor such as knowing their student in addition of their names and experience, determine their skills and knowledge, create a welcoming learning environment, make students feel comfortable and important, set a communicate expectations, encourage students to correct positively and with one and another. What we needed? We need two things. We need to rapid change and need to apply. We need a rapid change to suit the circumstances surrounding technical and vocational and educational education, and also apply international best practice in order to achieve target learning outcomes and qualifying graduates to join the labor market. There is some recommendation to achieve this. The first one is analysis of the faculty and the school members of the courses, planning with the others to achieve the target learning outcomes, utilizing versus teaching methodology and tools, planning lesson in light or according to target learning outcomes, effectively utilizing communication skills and participating in the learning process, linking the learner institution with reality, developing the personality of learner and developing his thinking, effectively managing the classroom, taking into account individual differences between learners, utilize modern means and techniques in educational process, evaluating learner uses versus methodology and tools, actively participating in various activity, providing feedback to the learner and leaders. Thank you so much for listening. It's my pleasure to attend with you. There is my contact data. It's my pleasure to communicate with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Dr. AbDOU, for your excellent presentation. I will come back to you at the end of the session to answer a few questions. Our fourth presenter will be Dr. Jocelyn Alayan ÜÇGÜL from Turkey. He is professor at Özyeğin University. Welcome, Dr. Jocelyn, and many thanks for accepting our invitation. Your presentation's title is Developing Innovative Teaching Pedagogies based on social change.
Good evening from Istanbul to everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdel Nasser, for your invitation to participate in such a great event and to be among such amazing speakers as well. I want to draw your attention to two main points that my intervention is going to be about higher education, especially legal education. And it is mainly based on basic practices for legal education report, as well as Carnegie Foundation report. My intervention is going to be about a new approach to legal education, and outcome-based education, developing innovative teaching pedagogies based on social change. The first question is, why is the need to improve legal education compelling? And here I'm going to be discussing 5 points. Law schools can do much better. The licensing process is not protecting the public. Ill preparation for bar examination, ill preparation for practice, and principles of accountability and consumer protection.
Regarding Dr. Jocelyn, do you have a presentation to share?
Yes, of course. If it's better for you, I will share it right now. Sorry, stop sharing. It is the first time that I use this technology. Screen sharing. It seems that I'm not able to do it, Dr. Abdel Nasser.
Please upload it first, Dr. Jocelyn. You can upload it to the Steam. Upload your presentation first, and it's open directly. If you try to share it, he asks you to upload it first.
Well, I have two options: video file and share screen. No other options.
Share screen, yes. And selected your presentation. It's open directly.
But you have to open your present. You have to have it on your computer.
It is already there, and it is already open. But entire screen, window, or Chrome tab. So I'm putting window, but it's not appearing, unfortunately. I also send it to you, Dr. Abdel Nasser, if you can do it from your side.
Okay.
I don't know if you allow me to continue, not to waste time.
Okay.
It will be better. So why law schools can do better? Well, no one can argue that there is a compelling need to change or at least improve the way we are teaching law. Law schools do some things well, but they do some things poorly or not at all, actually. While law schools help students acquire some of the essential skills and knowledge required for law practice, most law schools are not committed to prepare students to practice. It is generally conceded that most law school graduates are not as prepared for law practices as they could be or should be. A law school can best achieve excellence and have the most effective academic program when it possesses a clear mission, a plan to achieve that mission, and the capacity and willingness to measure its success or failure. It might not be possible to prepare students fully or the practice of law in only 3 or 4 years, but law schools can come much closer than they are doing today. An important step towards this is to articulate clear educational objectives for the program of instruction and preferably to describe those objectives in terms of desired outcomes. So outcome-based education is becoming the norm throughout higher education. So what about the licensing process, which is not protecting the public? What do we mean by this? Law school education is only the first step in the process of becoming an effective, responsible lawyer. The burden of preparing students for law practice should not rest solely on law schools. Other segments of the legal profession should assume more of the responsibility. If we give an example, bar admissions authorities could impose additional requirements on law school graduates to ensure that they are prepared to provide professional legal services before they are eligible for licenses to provide such services. We really believe that the public would be better served by a mandatory period of supervised practice before full admission to the legal profession. Also, licensing authorities should consider alternatives to the traditional bar exam, where the first part should assess students' abilities to think like lawyers and their command of traditional law subjects, and the second part should require students to demonstrate more breadth and depth of knowledge and ability to work with more complex legal problems. And third, should evaluate professional skills and values through more in-depth performance testing and professionalism review. So if we take Lebanon and Turkey as an example, in Lebanon, we take 4 years to finish law school, and after finishing law school, if we want to practice as a lawyer, we have to do an entrance exam to the Bar Association. It takes lots of preparation, lots of time, and then we start as an intern practicing law for 3 more years. It's like studying again. And then after 3 years, we do another exam to be a practicing lawyer. And it is really hard exam. After that, we can say that we are lawyers and we can. So it takes 8 to 9 years because sometimes you do not succeed. While in Turkey, for example, when you finish 4 years law school, you apply to the Bar Association and without doing any exam, and you start your internship for only 1 year, 6 years at an office and 6 years at the court, and this is it. And after you finish, you do not do any exam. So you can see the difference. What about preparation for bar examination? Law schools may offer bar preparation courses. They should be encouraged to prepare students for bar examinations in the most effective and efficient manner possible for credit as well, and have those credits counted toward the minimum required for graduation by accrediting authorities. It is really hypocritical for law schools to collect 3 or 4 years in tuition while failing to prepare most students for law practice, and while failing to prepare 1 in 4 students for to pass bar examination. In preparation for practice, the preparation for students to practice involves much more than simply training students to perform mechanical lawyering skills. There is a deep need for a broad-based legal education. In order to improve the preparation of law students for practice, law schools should expand their educational goals, improve competence and professionalism of their graduates, and attend to the well-being of their students. So how do we prepare students for practice? If we want to discuss this, we will discuss 3 points: expanding educational goals, improve the competence of and professionalism of all of the students, and attending to the well-being of students. And this is really very important. So by expanding educational goals, what do we mean? Law schools need to expand their educational goals. This involves 6 tasks. First, skilled, especially and academic knowledge base and research. Second, providing students with the capacity to engage in complex practice. Third, enabling students to learn to make judgments under conditions of uncertainty. Fourth, teaching students how to learn from experience. Fifth, introducing students to the disciplines of creating and participating in responsibilities and effective professional community. And finally, forming students able and willing to join an enterprise of public service. And we lack this, unfortunately. So what do we mean by improving the competence and professionalism of the students? Law schools are not producing enough graduates who provide access to justice, who are adequately competent and practice in a professional manner. Unfortunately, this is the fact. The failure of our system to provide adequate legal services to poor people is not a new problem, of course, but it remains an important issue for our society to resolve. Most law students, graduates are not sufficiently competent to provide legal services to clients or even to perform the work expected from them in large firms. We encourage law schools to do more to prepare their graduates for the jobs they are likely to have and the context they are likely to encounter as new lawyers. The public has lost much of its trust in lawyers and respect for them. Survey after survey of public opinion shows lawyers gradually slipping below politicians and journalists and even approaching car salesmen and advertising executive levels in the public esteem. The first step towards making the legal academy operate as a moral community is for it to begin to perceive itself as a community that is part of the larger moral community of the profession. For many law faculties and faculty members, this will require a reorientation on the purpose of legal education. An essential purpose of legal education should be to teach the whole mission skills of legal analysis and prediction, but it should also be to teach and practice professional ideals. Students and faculty should feel the presence of those ideals in the work of law school. Attending to the well-being of students, and this is really so important. The problems with legal education extend far beyond educational outcomes. There are clear and growing data that legal education is harmful to the emotional and psychological well-being of many law students. It is well known that lawyers suffer higher rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental illness, suicide, divorce, alcoholism, and drug abuse, and poor psychological health than the general population of other occupations. These problems are attributed to the stress of law practice, working long hours, and seeking extrinsic rather than intrinsic rewards in legal practice. Educational theorists tell us that we should strive to create classroom experiences where the classroom is the most, or the classroom is and must be a protected place, where students discover themselves and gain knowledge of the world, where they are free of all threats to their well-being, where they are received opinions is open to evaluation, where all questions are legitimate, where the explicit goal is to see the world more openly, fully, and deeply. Upon beginning law school, unfortunately, students quickly learn that law school values rational, objective analysis to the exclusion of other qualities, such as self-awareness and interpersonal relationships. They also learn that winning, as measured by the prizes of grades, law review membership, and certain jobs is the most important role. They believe that they must adopt those values as part of their changing professional identities. They believe that their personal visions of lawyering are naive and unrealistic. As a result, Students replace their hopeful expectations for finding meaning and purpose in their work. They will expect or they will accept unfulfilling work environments because they think there is no other option. Law school, unfortunately, causes students to lose the sense of purpose that made them want to become lawyers. This loss is not only harmful to individual students, but it also has enormous negative consequences for the profession and for those served by the profession. Sorry. The curriculum teaches that tough-minded analysis, hard facts, and cold logic are the tools for a good lawyer, and it has little room for emotion, imagination, or morality. For some students, learning to think like a lawyer means abandoning their ideals, ethical values, and sense of self. Professors who intimidate students, demean their opinions, and insult their values, thus calling on law teachers and other researchers to review their attitudes and educational practices to identify those most likely to have a deleterious effect on the basic needs of law students. What are the principles of accountability and consumer protection? Do I still have time, Professor? Okay, the accountability movement in higher education is likely to force law students or to improve the preparation of students for practice, or law schools to improve the preparation of students for practice. Consumerism is the driving force behind the accountability movement. If law schools cannot find ways to improve their performance on their own, they can expect increasing pressure from outside forces seeking to protect the consumers of law schools, products such as students, employers, and clients. In an age of increasing consumerism, one thing is certain: higher education will be closely watched, evaluated, and criticized by more people and from more quarters in the future than at any other time in its history. So what are the goals of the program of instruction? First, the first goal should be commitment. Second, clear educational goals. Third, articulate goals in terms of desired outcomes. Fourth, aim to develop competence. And finally, create effective, responsible lawyers. So be committed to preparing students for practice means that school is committed to preparing its students to practice law effectively and responsibly in the context they are likely to encounter as new lawyers. What do we mean by clearly articulate educational goals? Most law schools' curriculum can best be described as chaotic. They lack cohesion, coordination, and more common purpose, especially after the first year. Law teachers have constantly rejected calls to define their objectives more clearly. In addition to clarifying what we are trying to teach, it is important that we explain our teaching objectives to our students. The progressive development of legal reasoning skills and the ultimate phase shift could be accomplished more quickly with less stress if the educational objectives were made clear to students. Unfortunately, the critical underlying phase shift associated with legal thinking is rarely recognized and articulated when it might better be rendered visible and addressed. Articulate the goals in terms of desired outcomes. What do we mean by outcome? A statement of educational goals should describe, to the extent possible, what the school students will be able to do after graduating and how they will do it in addition to what they will know. That is, it should describe the school's desired outcomes. When objectives are not made explicit, the result is most certainly a preoccupation with specific knowledge. Currently, when law schools articulate educational goals, they almost universally refer to what students will do in class and what they will learn about the law or what specific skills they will acquire, not what they will be able to do with their knowledge and skills or how they should do it. If students are expected to develop a degree of independence in pursuit of learning, reach a satisfactory level of skills in communication, demonstrate sensitivity to their own values and those of their associates, become capable of collaborating with peers in defining and resolving problems, be able to recognize the relevance of their increasing knowledge to the current scene, and seek continually for insightful understanding and organization of their educational experience, these outcomes must be specifically stated. In addition, they must be made explicit in relation to learning experiences and by providing opportunities for demonstration of the developing behavior and for evaluation of it. What about the aim to develop competence? The program of instruction aims to develop competence, and graduates demonstrate at the point of admission the ability to solve legal problems effectively and responsibly, including the ability to work with the clients to identify their objectives, identify and evaluate the merits and risks of their options, and advise on solutions, progress civil and criminal matters towards solution using a range of techniques and approaches, draft agreements and other documentation to enable actions and transactions to be completed, and plan and implement strategies to progress cases and transactions. Create effective, responsible lawyers. How do we do this? Graduates have and are able to demonstrate at the point of admission to practice the attributes of effective, responsible lawyers, which include the following knowledge, understandings and skills and abilities, self-reflection and lifelong learning skills, intellectual and analytical skills, core knowledge of the law, core understanding of the law, professional skills, and professionalism. We could go to another big title, organizing the program of instruction. How do we do this? First, we should achieve harmony, develop knowledge, skills, and values, integrate theory, doctrine, practice, and practice teaching. Achieve harmony. Educational effectiveness requires law schools to aspire not only to comply with the best practices related to each topic discussed in this document, but also to aspire to achieve harmony among all topics. Harmony, in fact, is a defining characteristic of effective educational programs, and to achieve harmony, law schools need to harmonize, first, their educational programs with their missions, in the sense that the educational outcomes drive from the missions or driven from the missions, their curricula with their educational outcomes, in the sense that the curricula have been structures to build students toward mastery of the outcomes, and their course by course instructional objectives with their curricula, in the sense that the curricula design dictates course objectives. Likewise, legal education would be improved if law students or law schools employed educational practices that are in harmony with the course by course educational objectives, in that they facilitate students' achievement of the objectives. Evaluation process should be employed that are harmony with all of the above, in order for schools to determine their objectives are being accomplished. What about the delivery instructions? We have to continuously improve teaching skills, create and maintain effective and healthy teaching and learning environment, choose teaching methods that most effectively and efficiently achieves desired goals, enhance learning with technology, use experiment courses. How we do this? The most acknowledgeable teachers, however, are not necessarily excellent teachers. The best teachers, unlike so many others, have used their knowledge to develop techniques for grasping fundamental principles and organizing concepts that others can use to begin building their own understanding and abilities. They know how to simplify and clarify complex subjects, to cut to the heart of the matter with provocative insights, and they can think about their own thinking in the discipline, analyzing its nature and evaluating its quality. The capacity to think metacognitively drives much of what we observed in the best teaching. So although one cannot become a great teacher without knowing the subject extremely well, more than knowledge is required to excel. How to create and maintain effective and healthy teaching and learning environment? The learning environments in the best teachers' classrooms provide challenging yet supportive conditions in which learners feel a sense of control over their education, work collaboratively with others, believe that their work will be considered fairly and honestly, and try, fail, and receive feedback from expert learners in advance of and separate from any summative judgment of their effort. Law teachers need to create and maintain student-friendly climates in their classrooms and other interactions with students. Students need to feel safe and free from fear of in-class humiliation. Only then they will be willing to take academic risks. The atmosphere in the classroom should be one of mutual respect and collaborative learning. Law schools that value the opinions and priorities of their students give students as much autonomy as possible and explain why students do not have autonomy in some things. These schools are likely to have students who are happier, healthier, more motivated, and more successful than schools that are less supportive of students' autonomy. Choose teaching methods that most effectively and efficiently achieve desired goals. Students' learning is enhanced when we have clear educational objectives and use the most effective means to make learning possible. Enhanced learning with technology, it is critical now. If technology is not the future of legal education, it is at least part of the future. Proven and experimental uses of technology will continue to grow, and some components of legal education will be transformed by it. Distance learning now is already becoming an expected part of the landscape of legal education, and interactive computer programs are allowing students to acquire knowledge and skills outside the classroom setting. Technology can make instruction and evaluation more efficient and effective, but technology is no more and no less than a tool for implementing best teaching practices. The use of experimental courses. Experimental courses are those courses that rely on experimental education as a significant for primary method of instruction. In law schools, this involves using students' experiences, and the roles of lawyers or their observations of practicing lawyers and judges to guide their learning. Experimental education integrates theory and practice by combining academic inquiry with actual experience. Learning is not education, and experimental learning differs from experimental education. Learning happens with or without teachers and institutions. For example, let me skip these. These courses in law schools should differ from each other in the following ways. The experimental courses. First, in simulation-based courses, students assume professional roles and perform law-related tasks in hypothetical situations. In in-house clinical course, students represent clients or perform other professional roles under the supervision of members of the faculty. And finally, in externship courses, students represent clients or perform other professional roles under the supervision or practice of practicing lawyers, or they observe or assist practicing lawyers or judges in their work. Finally, learning assessment, important and purpose of assessment. Grades are important in law school, particularly for first-year students. After one semester, grades determine which students are eligible for law review, moot court, and other significant opportunities in law school, which students are most likely to pass the bar examination, and which students will compete for the most highly compensated jobs. Aside from the need to protect the public by denying graduation to those few trainees who are not expected to overcome their deficiencies, the outcomes of assessment should be to foster learning, inspire confidence in the learner, enhance the learner's ability to self-monitor, and drive institutional self-assessment and curricular change. And institutions' decisions about what and how it assesses student learning reflect the values of the institution itself. The goals and methods we select for assessment directly affect student learning. Changing the assessment procedure is one of the most effective ways of changing how and what students learn. Thus, as legal educators should consider carefully what we are trying to assess and how we are doing it. Best practices for assessing student learning. Effective assessment exhibits qualities of validity, reliability, and fairness. Validity means that an assessment tool must accomplish the purpose for which it was intended. Reliability means the best or the test or measuring procedure yields the same results on repeated trials. A single do or die final exam or essay exam given under time pressure at the end of the semester fails all three criteria. It is neither valid, nor valuable or reliable, nor fair. So what are the recommendations for improving assessment practices arising from the work of numerous scholars? 5 key principles that should influence the design process of an improved assessment system. 1, learning is the point. Learning must be made visible in order to be assessed. Learning is multifaceted and develops over time. Assessment must reflect the particular purpose being served, such as evaluating, educating, assuring quality, conferring distinction, and documenting professional capability. And finally, assessment occurs in context. All these principles, but we have more. I will finalize here because I think I finished my time. I cannot see it. Yes. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your very rich presentation, Dr. Jocelyn. And now we will ask you some questions, a few questions to our speakers, presenters. The first one is to Dr. NAICKER. It isn't with you, with us?
I think he's trying to
NAICKER.
connect. He's trying to connect.
He is not connected.
No, he was disconnected.
Dr. NAICKER. Can you hear me, Dr. NAICKER? I have a question to you. Do you agree that developing countries should develop their own learning assessment framework based on humanist and non-market vision?
Yes, I agree totally with that comment. I think that's what developing countries need to do. The challenge is that developing countries have uncritically borrowed concepts from the West, which do not work in the developing context. And you see quite clearly what has happened over the last few decades is that education has become a commodity and has become the next market. And so people are making a lot of money out of education, and developing countries are at major risk, and they're putting the many children's lives at risk by following the economic model of education. So the substantial presentations we heard today, very good presentations, those presentations need to take root in the developing world. That's my contention. I lost you for a while there.
Dr. NAICKER?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Dr. NAICKER, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Dr. NAICKER?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Naji. Hello. Did you
NAICKER,
did you hear my answer, Dr. Naji?
can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I can't hear you, Dr. NAICKER.
I can hear you.
Dr. AbDOU, can you hear me?
I
You
can hear
mute.
Professor NAICKER and I can hear Professor Naji also, but I think there is some problem, Professor Naji, over there on your side.
Yeah, I think Dr. AbDOU is muted.
Muted. Yeah, he's muted.
Yeah.
I hear you, Dr. Naika.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I hear your answer also.
So I answered the question. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes. Yeah, I
I
agree
think
with
we
that statement.
have
Dr. Abdel Nasser.
So I agree with that statement,
Yes.
and maybe I should just explain this, that what's happening in the world is that big capital has targeted the education across the world, right? The developing nations have targeted the developing nations, and they see it as a possibility to accumulate wealth. So I am deeply skeptical of all these organizations that are involved in the developing world, because I think their objective is an economic model. So, for example, PISA,
Yes.
they want to bring in skills, they want to bring in materials, and they want to train teachers. But if the success of the education systems in the developing country was so easy, they would have achieved that goal a long time ago. They've been in the developing world for many decades. So the developing world needs to conceptualize the problems and use a planning tool to address those problems. Or we're not going to make any progress in the developing world. Morocco has invested a lot of money in education over the last 20 years. They have changed their policy, their curriculum policy. They have made many interventions. I am extremely skeptical of economic models of education, and I'm very skeptical of what's happening in the developing world, because I think poor children are really struggling.
I agree with you, and I think they need one umbrella to collecting them together and working in a developed country and make some real results to development skills for students.
Agreed.
Yes. Where is Dr. Abu Nasser?
I can't see him. I can only see Dr. Ambalika.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. DOGRA, and I cannot see. I can only see Dr. DOGRA.
Yes. We only see Dr. Dogra. Dr. Dogra, do you see any of others?
No, I can only see myself.
Okay, it's very nice. We see your reflections in the internet. It's
Yes.
yes.
I think there's a problem with the
Connection. Yes, it's
the connection. Yeah. But it worked well for almost 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
It's you of us now. So thank Allah.
Dr. Naji has disappeared.
He will come soon, and also Dr. Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Yes. So your student is now teaching face-to-face in the school or university or some kind of blended learning?
Yes, we are using blended learning here, but many students, they are appearing now, and the regular classes, they are going on.
Okay. But you prefer, you agree with face-to-face learning is the best or blended learning?
I think blended learning is a good way when we are slowly transitioning into a regular, in a normal, we are ushering into a normal life. Then blended learning is one of the way through which we can do that, and rather than exclusive online learning.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dogra, Dr. Sigamoney, what do you think about blended learning?
Yeah, whenever we choose a method of teaching, we have to find that it benefits the majority of people.
Yes.
And it must also benefit the poor people, because already you have a digital divide. And then you use a methodology that alienates the poorest people, and they don't have an opportunity to learn. And that's unacceptable. Morocco plays soccer in the World Cup. Algeria plays, and Tunisia plays, and South Africa plays in the World Cup, and India's got all these great cricket players. If we can produce those people with that level of focus and attention and money, why can't we do it in education?
Yes.
It's because we don't control our education. Our education is controlled in London, in America, in Paris, in all these other places. And that's a human tragedy, that we can have so many illiterate people in the world, but we can send people to the moon.
Yes.
Developing countries need to take care of their conditions.
Yes, thank you so much. But as you know, face-to-face learning is the best. You give the right model to the student rather than the blended learning. Even they have the tools or the technology, they still need the models. The models in this case is the teachers or the professor in the university. So they need to make real interactive between them and the professor and teachers inside real classroom.
Yeah. The human element. You cannot dismiss the human element.
I think Dr. Abdel Nasser Nagi sent some notes. It appears in the screen now. They apologize and they have a technical problem.
Oh, okay.
With this session. So what do you think? We can wait for Dr. Abdel Nasser, or what we need to do now?
He says, our apologies, we have a technical problem and are forced to end the session. Bye. So I don't know if you can say to Dr. Naji that we always appreciate his energy, we always appreciate his efforts and his commitment to education. And we cannot end the session by not saying that. I wanted to tell him that, but I can't see him anymore. But if you could please convey that message to him.
Yes,
it's
I will.
Been such an important task.
Yes, and it's just an important moment for me to attend with you, Dr. Ambalika and Dr. Sigamoney and Dr. Jocelyn, and of course, Dr. Abdel Nasser Nagi. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you on another sessions, inshallah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.